Hi, everybody. It's Andrea Paquette, president and co-founder of the Stigma-Free Society. Thank you so much for joining us on Facebook Live today for our charity. It is a very special day because we actually have a youth panel. These youth are really awesome. They have been stars in our videos, sharing their personal stories. I'm going to introduce them and also just talk casually with some questions for our young people. So let's get into it. All right. So we have Mack and Mia, but Mack, M-A-C-K, as you can see on the screen, we're going to refer to as Mackenzie. Correct? Correct. All right. So Mack, I was wondering maybe you could introduce yourself and say a couple words.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Mac. I'm 19. I identify as autistic and trans non-binary. My pronouns are she, he, they, and I'm currently broadcasting out of Calgary.
Perfect. And Mackenzie?
Hi, I'm Mac. Or Mackenzie. I'm 23. I am transmasculine. I identify as a man, and yeah.
That's perfect. And then we'll get in today a little bit into your story, which is very inspiring and amazing. So thank you for being here. And Mia, to unmute yourself and just maybe share a few words, your age, and maybe where you are right now.
So I'm Mia, I'm 19, and I'm currently on Vancouver Island up in Duncan.
Yeah, which is actually pretty close to me as I am in Souk, BC, where I moved recently. So nice to be on the island, girl. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. So I'm just going to jump into a few questions, and probably best if I just address who it's to, but also, keep it casual and may ask some of you the same questions. So we'll just go along here. I was curious, Mac, if we could start with you. And I was really wanting you to share your journey of mental health and also some of the challenges that you've been through as a youth. And could you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, for sure. So I was diagnosed with autism at 13. Before that, the focus was mostly on my physical delays, and then the social and executive functioning delays became a lot more apparent later on, and the disparities between my peers were a lot more noticeable. The same year I was diagnosed with autism, I was also diagnosed with severe scoliosis and had spinal fusion surgery about 7 to 8 months later. I was also in a new school, so grade 8 was fun. And then last year, I lost my younger sister to suicide after a long battle with mental health. And yeah.
Thank you so much. And in the video, we have of each of these amazing young people where Mac shares in detail. We have a 3-minute version and an 8-minute version of that story. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, Mac. I was wondering if we could go to Mia. I am really intrigued by your story, and I feel like you are a stigma buster for being brave and speaking up. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your mental health story, if that's all right for you.
Definitely. So I have an illness called dissociative identity disorder. And pretty much the simplest way to describe it is that there are multiple consciousnesses, multiple people who share one body. And because of that disorder, I struggle a lot with time loss and losing different things. And it's a really stigmatized disorder. And growing up, I didn't know that it was abnormal to have years, hours, minutes missing from your life. And I struggled with everything from being suicidal to being depressed to having panic attacks. And it wasn't until 2 years ago I got diagnosed and I was like, whoa, this makes a lot of sense now. But I still struggle with my mental illnesses on a daily basis. It's a constant battle with myself, but also with how the public perceives my specific disorder. It's a very stigmatized disorder in the fact that people assume that if you have dissociative identity disorder, you are abusive, you're going to hurt other people, and it's a very fantastical disorder in the way that not many people can understand that there are separate parts who all share one brain, but all of those parts were created due to childhood trauma.
Right. And what is the old name for dissociative identity disorder?
It used to be multiple personality disorder.
Yeah, and then that obviously ignites a lot of stigma and misunderstanding. So do you feel calling it DID in the DSM-5 is truly, is it better?
I definitely think it's better because I think it more accurately represents the disorder. A huge part of the disorder is dissociation. Yeah. And that's pretty much the hallmark of the disorder is dissociating.
Okay.
That's, yeah, everyone with the disorder dissociates severely.
Okay. And I think it's really hard for a lot of people to understand what that means. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And Mackenzie, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your history. You told me you identify as trans male. A little bit about your story would be awesome.
Yeah, so I've had extreme anxiety and depression since I was quite young. Some of that was tied to me being trans and not properly being able to identify, and some of that is just part of who I am. And I also have ADHD, so that kind of comes out in ways that I can't focus very well, or I have memory loss and things like that. And I only recently got diagnosed with that this year, so I've been struggling with that for years, but not really knowing what was wrong, or what was happening. So a lot of through me growing up was with my gender identity and mental health issues and stuff, was me just not understanding and not having anyone to really tell or listen to, or not having the words to identify. So yeah, that's kind of me.
Okay. What kind of stigma have you faced? Growing up, there was a lot of challenges for you, and you've shared in your video with us a lot of times you felt lost and misunderstood, and even within yourself. So I was wondering, how did you have you faced a lot of stigma in your life, and how did you overcome that if you have?
Yeah, I'd say I have, and a lot of it, especially when I was younger, because I was presenting quite masculine at quite a young age, but it came with the labels of tomboy, or I would grow out of it, and that sort of stuff. So a lot of the stigma for me, especially when I was young, was that I was lying, or that I was trying to trick people. So those were the messages I was getting around my presentation and my identity. So then I kind of internalized that and believed that I was faking it or tricking people. And yeah, so that was really difficult, and I internalized that and tried to be the polar opposite. I tried to be what people expected me to be. Yeah, and then to get through it, I think I just had really good people around me. I think I had hit a breaking point, and I found representation online, and I just couldn't keep lying to myself, and I kind of just pushed through. Yeah.
No, that is amazing, and demonstrates a lot of strength. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I was curious, Mac, I'd like to come back to you. And with your struggles with mental health, and you also said that you are on the spectrum with autism, right? And I was curious, how has that shaped you over the years? Do you feel like it's had any positive effects, or has it been very stigmatizing and always negative? What did you create out of that challenge?
I think that it's definitely made me who I am. It comes with a lot of strengths. I'm very observant. I'm very creative. My imagination tends to be all over the place. which definitely has its benefits. There are also definitely challenges I face and stigma around, like, oh, you don't look autistic and things like that, and people just like assume you're making it up. And that can be difficult to face because you're having all these challenges that are so real to you, but people just don't see them as real. Still to this day, there are people in my life that don't necessarily believe that I'm autistic, which, fine, they can have their own opinion, but that can also be difficult. Yeah, there's definitely difficulties with like peer relationships and friend making and executive functioning and just keeping up with the world, and my capacity levels tend to go all over the place as well sometimes. So a lot of those things are very invisible to the outside world. And yeah.
And when you received the diagnosis, how did that feel?
For me, it helped so many things make so much sense. I know some people don't like the puzzle piece as representation for autism for a variety of reasons, but for me, I've taken it and picture it as like all the pieces finally clicking together and making sense for me. Like all these things that were happening when I was younger suddenly just make sense. Like whether I was having to leave places because I was tantruming in the middle of the zoo, or like I just wasn't clicking with my peers the same way. Like all of that now makes sense.
So it seemed like it was quite a bit of a relief for you then.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Mac. I'm going to go over to Mia. Mia, I really admire a lot of the advocacy you do around so many different causes, and you face a lot of different challenges on different fronts, and I see you being a real voice for so many of them. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about your activism and what you're really passionate about.
Yeah, so I am involved in a whole bunch of different things. I have a YouTube channel where I make videos about pretty much just how I go about my day-to-day life. I have a whole bunch of physical challenges. Two or 3 years ago, I lost all of my hearing. And I'm really involved in all kinds of advocacy. I love speaking about mental health. I love speaking about accessibility. And recently I got the opportunity to speak to medical students about their biases when dealing with someone who has a mental illness, and how many medical professionals are kind of biased towards blaming everything on the mental illness instead of seeing all the physical symptoms for what they are.
I really love it. And I appreciate all that you're doing for so many different communities and such. You know, I was thinking about DID and your illness, and it can be very difficult when you told me about losing gaps of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you live every day? Like what is your strategies to make this work in this world here, you know?
I use a lot of technology and a lot of really concrete physical items like calendars. And I also heavily depend on friends to be like, hey, just reminding you, you have things to do. But I really depend on everyone working together, like people in my support system and also everyone else who lives inside of this body. I really depend on everyone's help to make sure I am functioning. And when kind of like I slip below the level of not my normal functioning, that's when I have to start looking into more professional help, like going inpatient or maybe seeing my therapist a little bit more often. So it's a tough balance sometimes, because I'm pretty sure everyone here knows that when you start feeling low, you don't always recognize it. And then all of a sudden you've kind of just hit rock bottom and you don't know how you ended up there. And it's really hard to get back to functional again.
Yeah, no doubt. And having that management of DID and your life and can't be easy. So kudos to you, man. And you've told me so many things and strategies and writing things down, right? Like you were saying that you record everything because you could lose gaps of time and not know where you left off.
Yeah, I can lose like 2 weeks of time in an instant. Like I could blink and it will be like December maybe. Wow. And it's pretty scary sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, we're going to come back to you, and I'd like to go to Mackenzie again. Mackenzie, I was wondering, what does stigma-free mean to you, and how can people practice that kind of lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think being stigma-free means, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but like breaking down boxes. And I think that's the thing is like we we have this like normal, what we think normal is, and everybody has to cram into that. But I don't think anybody fits into that. So being stigma free is realizing that, we all have our differences and just accepting that and living with an open lens of you know sorry letting people be who they are and have the room to be who they are and get the
Yeah,
help that
and that
they yeah.
acceptance, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Just overall acceptance, I think. Yeah.
yeah, awesome. And how have you, let's talk about self-stigma for a moment, because I think a lot
Sure.
of times when we talk about stigma, a lot of us think of the world and the social stigma that's out there and being cast upon many people who are in different circumstances, whether it's mental illness, addictions, developmental disabilities, etc. But self-stigmas, how would you explain how self-stigma has affected you? That judgment and that shame that we feel, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah. Wow, that's a good question. I think that's an ongoing battle for sure. But yeah, self-stigma has probably been some of the hardest to get through. Like you start to kind of gaslight yourself and, be like, well, I'm just lazy or I'm not good enough or I'm making it up or that sort of stuff. And so I think that's the thing is sometimes that is heavier than the actual world around you. Um, and so for me, I think having a good support team has helped me with that, but also, uh, finding strategies that help me maybe break out of the deep dark moments or realizing to go with the flow and like I'm not lazy, I just can't right now and just going with when you can and when you can't, right? So
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is really removing that self-judgment all the time,
yeah,
right?
yes,
Yeah, I have to do that a lot because I think, many of us who deal with struggles and challenges of mental health or whichever are pretty hard on ourselves, aren't we?
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
and we need to be easier on ourselves and more kind. So thank you for your
for sure.
answer. Um, so, Mac, when it comes to the stigma-free culture and cultivating that in relation to the autism community and understanding, um, this whole territory, like, what would you want to say to people to help them understand, for instance, where people with autism are coming from specifically?
I think it's important to remember that everyone's experience is so unique. They say this a lot, but like if you've met one person with autism, you really have met one person with autism. It goes the same for everybody though. You've met one person, you've met one person. And it's really important to not clump everyone together. I think it can be really easy to be like, oh, that person has autism, but they don't look like that, therefore they don't have autism. And there could be that part. So I think being open minded and just approaching people where they're at is really important. The same way you approach someone with like severe anxiety or mental illness. If they're saying something is happening, believe them. Like that's the other key thing.
Oh, I really love that. Believing people for how they are feeling and what they're sharing. And obviously they don't want to be experiencing those things. And what kind of strategies, Mac, I'm just curious, would you recommend for people who are going through hard times, who are dealing with mental health issues? Is there any message you'd like to get out there?
I would say use your supports. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. And sometimes reaching out for help, you can send like 15 emails and nobody will respond. keep trying. Someone will respond. And with COVID right now, you can get support from across the country because half of it's online. So if you don't like anyone in your area, as long as they serve other provinces, then reach out to other provinces. Like, do not be afraid to utilize those supports. And when it comes to academic accommodations, don't be afraid to use those either. They're there to help you. Maybe you won't need them permanently, but if they help get you where you want to go, then use them.
Awesome. I love this whole thing about using resources. That's why they're there, right? They're there for people who are struggling. Mia, I really want to talk about stigma because of DID. And if you could discuss like some of the examples of stigma, say societal, and then maybe get into some of the self-stigma stuff. But has it been hard, like talking and admitting that you have this mental illness?
It's definitely been a journey, to say the least. I would say most people in my life don't know I have this disorder, because I'm afraid to tell people about it because there's so much stigma around. People assume it's too rare of a disorder to have, so if you say you have it, you must be faking. And then I end up internalizing that, and I'm like, wait, if they think I'm faking, maybe I'm faking. And I have a professional diagnosis. I know this logically, but internally I'm like, maybe I'm just making this all up. Maybe I'm just doing this to myself. And really, like, the culture surrounding the disorder is very wishy-washy. Even medical professionals don't particularly believe in its existence. And then with media representation, it's portrayed as a real disorder, but in a very fake way. So there was recently a movie, Split, and that's pretty much the only mainstream representation of my disorder. And they have an alter who is a beast and can climb on ceilings and run super fast. And that's not realistic. That's not what this disorder is about. Majority of the alters and the parts inside a person with DID have all suffered some really bad trauma and will probably just end up fronting and like crying and watching like Disney instead of going out and hurting other people, which is what everyone assumes will happen with DID.
And how's it been for you personally? Like when you got your diagnosis, were you relieved, or how did this feel for you?
So when I got my diagnosis, I was like, nope, that's fake. I definitely don't have that. And that's kind of what my thinking was for a good few months. I was like, I think you're wrong. I think I'm just anxious, which I am anxious, but I also have dissociative identity disorder. It took a long time of looking back and talking to friends and kind of tracking my symptoms from like day one and being like, okay, maybe I have this disorder. Possibly, I'll consider it. And then after about a year, I was like, okay, yeah, I think this is definitely it. I started to claim it. And I was like, okay, yeah, I have this disorder. Let's start doing life again.
And what do you do to manage this disorder, DID, dissociative identity disorder, just for those who are tuning in now?
Management-wise, medication, support systems, making sure I write down absolutely everything. Like after I hop off today, I'll just go and like journal about how it went, or I'll write what I had for breakfast or what I'm going to do later. Because a big part of dissociative identity disorder is time loss, I can't depend on being around to do the things I need to do. So I depend on other people and symptom management with medications and just remembering to write everything down.
Wow, thank you so much. And learning about strategies and creating information, knowledge, and insight into DID is so rare. I've never even met anybody who has dealt with this disorder. So I'm so happy to have you on our Stigma-Free team and constantly sharing and creating that voice, especially that youth voice that is so needed. Mackenzie, I was wondering, so in the LGBTQ 2S+, I believe it's called, community. Hope I got that right. I was wondering if you could offer some words of wisdom to young people. Like, can you give us some words of what you would want them to know when they're going through hard times?
Yeah, I'd say my answer is probably pretty similar to Mac's answer, but I think a sense of community and reaching out to people is really, really important. I think especially right now with COVID, and I know a lot of LGBTQ plus youth are maybe not in accepting homes right now. And so finding that community, whether it could be through a school right now or online or anything like that, I think that is so important. Yeah.
And I think it's just that whole, like you told me before, I think it was something about finding your family. It doesn't necessarily is your birth family, but what was that?
Your chosen family. Yeah.
Chosen family.
Yeah.
And that you will find them. And I love how you always have that message of being true to yourself, which is really amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so Mac, I just want to know, is there anything else you would like to share? I often do not shy away, as you don't, from the issue of suicide. And I was wondering, you lost a sibling. And if somebody is out there and is really wondering how they can, help themselves in a way to deal with something like that, do you have any advice?
I think I would go back to the reaching out as much as you can. For me, I lost my sibling, or I like to say I lost my sibling probably 2 years before she physically died, just because her illness took over a lot and she was not the same person that I grew up with. That can be really hard on a sibling because suddenly your life has changed and you're having to adapt and, for me, control a lot of my impulses to be loud and excitable and just happy around her. Like, she could not handle that, so I had to use a lot of impulse control and be quite quiet and calm and just sit there. I think going off to school, because I started in university and was away from home 3 months before her death, and that summer before that I kept very busy volunteering with different organizations, and I think that's one way I definitely coped. And turns out there's a lot of people who have gone through very similar things. So when you mention it to people, they'll either say, oh, I know someone that I lost, or I know someone who lost someone, and like there's immediate connection. It's way more common than a lot of us realize. So I think if you're comfortable opening up about that, that's definitely another way you can grow connections. Like, as soon as she died, I went to work with Whistler Adaptive for the winter still, or during Christmas break as planned. And I found that relief of working on the hill and like being in nature really nice. But it turns out that one of my very close instructors, who's also a coworker now, had recently lost someone as well. And we were able to really connect over that. And it was really nice to have that connection. So I think as soon as you're ready, reaching out, going on, there's Facebook groups even of like bereaved sibling support, and that was the first place I actually turned. I haven't gone back, but within that first night of finding out, that's where I went, and things felt a lot better just being able to share it with strangers.
Yeah. And peer support groups, bereavement line, things like that, those types of resources, right? And I think there's nothing better than like, really, for me, like having bipolar disorder, when I speak to somebody else who has bipolar disorder, I feel that, like you say, that immediate connection. And this isn't an isolated thing. Many people can be there for each other, right? All right. Thank you, Mac. Okay, I'm going to close up in a little bit, but I want to go to Mia first. Mia, with your activism, why is it important for people, do you feel, to take on a cause and champion it? Do you think that's important in life for others?
I think it's really important, especially if you're struggling with something externally, whether that be your mental health, your physical health. I find it helps to have something other than yourself to focus on, because suddenly it's like, okay, I have other things to do. I can just ignore it for a little bit. And you're also bettering the world when you're supporting like an autistic group, or, you know, you're going and volunteering and helping somewhere else. It's good for your mental health, and it also just allows you to make more connections and get more support, because you might not have found these people if you hadn't have gone and involved yourself in these things.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. And one last thing, Mac and Mackenzie really shared their words of inspiration. And I was wondering for yourself, if somebody's getting bullied or stigmatized and feeling really lost, like, and I think you've really been there, and you've shared so many of those elements of your story with Stigma-Free on the video and with myself. What are your words of support for somebody, or any inspiration for young people or just people in general who are dealing with such things?
I think it's important to know that what you're experiencing is really valid. With bullying, you can kind of end up feeling like that's not actually happening. You feel like no one else sees what's happening, but I promise, as terrible as it sounds, it's happening to you, and you deserve the support, and you deserve the love and kindness, and you don't deserve bad things happening to you. And reaching out and getting support from people is really, really important, as difficult as it is.
Yeah, exactly. Reaching out for help seems to be a big theme, and that's a big theme for the Stigma-Free Society. So I thank all of you. Please stay on the stream as we exit. I'd like to thank you as well behind the broadcast studio. And thank you, everybody, for watching the Stigma-Free Society wonderful youth panel today. So I really appreciate Mia, Mac, and it was so funny doing your videos and filming you guys, because it's like, yeah, it's like a band, right? Mia, Mac, and Mac. It just sounds MMM. It sounds so good. So we're really happy to have you on board. So thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day, and we truly appreciate all of your support. Thanks, guys.